Hi stationery friends, welcome to Ginger Peachy Stationery. My name is Sarah and today I want to talk through some more terms about fountain pens, but this time specifically about ink. I have a lot shorter list this time than I did the other day, so hopefully this should go pretty quickly because I have got to go get ready to sing in a symphony concert tonight, so I don't have much time. So I'm coming at this assuming that you know little to nothing about fountain pen ink, which is probably not true, but I just say that to say don't be offended if you're like, I know all these things, because then you're probably not like a super beginner in fountain pens. So anyway, I want to start with, ink is the liquid that we put into our pens that puts the color on the page, okay? I know that's a dumb thing to have to say, but there is a difference between fountain pen ink that would go into a pen and dip nib ink. So a lot of people assume that ink is ink, but if you go into a craft store and you find where they have like the nibs that look like this or similar, or even more similar to this one, and you look at the ink that's there in little bottles, most of that is probably not for fountain pens. A pen like this that you would see someone doing calligraphy with uses something like India ink, calligraphy ink, I don't know the different names for it. I'm not into doing this very much, but it is a thicker consistency, and if you put that in, India ink is the term that I know, or like Sumi ink, if you put that into a pen, it will be clogged up, I don't want to say forever because you can probably clean it, but it will not work. So make sure that whatever ink you are getting says it's for fountain pens. So some properties to do with ink. First of all, fountain pen ink is, how do I say this? It's not exactly like one size fits all. Like not every ink works the same in every pen or on every paper. So we're talking about like interactions between pen, ink, and paper. Here's a bottle of ink I can put into the frame. Talking about interactions between those three different things. So when you're writing with a fountain pen, there are three kind of main characteristics that people like, that they really look for in fountain pen ink. And those three things are the three S's: sheen, shading, and shimmer. So I have a notebook here that I thought I would open up and show you some examples of these things. So first of all, shading inks are my favorite kind of inks. Shading just means that when you write with your pen, your ink pools, usually, towards the bottom, but it pools in different areas and gives you lighter and darker areas of ink. So let me see, I had an example here that was really strong. Okay, right here. This Franklin Christoph ink right here, if you look closely, you can see how it's darker mostly at the bottom and lighter at the top. That is called shading, and that is literally where your ink will pool, make little pools, and when it dries, it's darker than, in some places where it pooled. So, for instance, this Pilot Custom 74 has in it Sailor Shikiori Fuji Sugata ink, which is a favorite of mine, and this is a very this is a shading ink. That is my favorite. I prefer shading inks over shimmer or sheen. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this very well, but watch when I draw these lines. See how it made that little pool at the bottom when I let go? That is called shading. And so, you can write, when you write, I am not looking at the paper, I'm looking at the camera. So that's why I'm writing crazy. You can see it in this ink over here, in this Navajo turquoise, that it's kind of lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. That is shading. and it is my favorite type of ink. Another one, let me zoom back out, sorry. Another type of ink that a lot of people really love are sheening inks. So sheening inks have a main color, but then another color sort of emerges as it dries. So I'm looking at the Sailor Ink Studio 764. You can see that this is like a dark teal color, but when you turn it in the light, the words are almost all a purpley red color, or a reddish purple color. And I'm sure you can see, because I can see it in the camera, these little shiny places where it shows a different color. That is sheen. This Lamy pink also has a sheen to it. It's kind of a gold sheen. So the main color is pink, but it has this bright sheen that emerges. A really good example is what is it called? Emerald of Chivor. Emerald of Chivor was extremely popular a few years ago. And it has this red, it's this teal, has a red that shows up around the edges. Also, let me see, Diamine Wild Strawberry is one that I have liked. It's been one of my favorite inks. I need to calm down a little bit because I'm a little bit like panicky about getting this done in time, and it's going to make me do a very poor job. And you might say I'm already doing a poor job. You can see this like golden, it comes out kind of greenish around these edges. I know that's hard to see, but sheen, that is sheen. And then the third is shimmer. Now shimmer is kind of obvious. It's tiny little glitter particles that are in your ink. This Emerald of Chivor has a very, very nice shimmer. Also on this same page, this Dominant Industry Dawn. I know it's hard to see. It's hard to capture shimmer on camera, but it's so beautiful. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with shimmer. I don't know. I don't always love shimmering inks, but a lot of people love them all the time. So it is really a personal preference kind of thing. They used to be kind of, people always said, oh, shimmers will clog up your pens, but the newer ones, especially, they've really been improved upon. And so if you're buying from a well-known brand, your shimmer ink should not clog up your pen. And if it does, you can clean it. It just requires some extra rinsing. You know, a lot of people like to use a pen that they can fully take apart to clean out the shimmer. When you put shimmer ink in a pen, like this TWSBI Eco, I have that same Dawn ink in there. You can see the shimmer in there. You do, I mean, not everyone does this, but you do kind of want to agitate that ink in there a little bit, get it moving so that it, you know, gets suspended into the liquid when you go to write with it. Now, obviously, like when I sit down to write a quick note, it's not going to be all of this up here, but it still gets it moving down in the feed, you know, of the pen, and kind of helps to distribute that shimmer. That's kind of an important thing to do. Otherwise, you'll write with all the liquid and you'll kind of leave all the glitter in your pen. This ink in this pen, I'm sorry, I keep hitting my tripod. This ink in here is a very heavy shimmer. I really do like this ink. This is Juan Midwinter Festival by Van Diemen's. And, you know, I mean, I just put it between my hands and kind of roll it. You can gently shake it, but if you shake it hard, you'll, you know, send ink flinging out of the nib. But you can kind of gently shake it, just get that shimmer moving in there. And you can't really see a difference in this one because it kind of sticks to the edges. But the good thing about a piston filler, which of course this one is, and so is the TWSBI Eco, is that when you go to clean it, you push the piston down and it will kind of push that glitter out. If you're a fan of glitter inks, you probably won't mind if there's a little remnant of glitter left in your pen. But plenty of pens are very easily deep cleaned, and so you can find a pen to use your shimmer inks in that can be cleaned. Another property that an ink can have that it's not visible is scented inks. So this is one of my most favorite purple inks. It's gorgeous. This is DeAtramentis Violet, and it is a scented ink. I believe they also have a violet that's not scented. Oh, and this has some sheen that I can't see usually in a pen, actually. A lot of times sheen is really visible in large swabs, but when you're just writing with it, you don't see it, because I never really see that sheen when I'm writing with it. But this is a favorite purple of mine, and it does have a light, I don't know, it's kind of strong sometimes, scent of violets. That is not my main reason for loving this ink. It is the color that I love and the flow. It flows really well. I've got it in a fine nib right now, and I use it daily, and I do get that little whiff of violet sometimes and kind of go whew, but it's not bad. So that's something you may love or you may not love. So those are kind of some main properties of inks. Hello, post-concert Sarah here. It went really well, thank you for asking. We sang Mozart's Requiem, and it was wonderful, and it was beautiful, and I am sad it is over, but my voice is tired, and I am tired. 3 nights of rehearsals, late night, and then a concert. I'm tired, but I'm also wishing I could sing it again, so it's wonderful. But I had to interject because I was watching this video back tonight and realized that there were 2 things that I didn't talk about that I want to not miss. So one of those things is chroma shading inks. Chroma Shaders, dual shaders. Sailor Manyo Nekoyanagi is a really good example of this. My dog is being a crazy dog over here. I'm sorry if you can hear him. You can see that this goes from purple to blue, and when you're just writing with this ink, it does that in the ink. Excuse me, especially on the more fountain pen friendly papers. This is one of my most favorites, most favorite inks at all, much less favorite, chroma shader. Sailor Ink Studio 123 is another really popular one. It's got the purple and the green. Sailor Manyo Haha. I couldn't find my swatch in here, but here is Sailor Manyo Haha, another chroma shader, very popular. I wish I could find, let's see, Troublemaker Milky Ocean. I tried to show it once already and it didn't show up very well on camera. But it is a purple to blue. I know you can't see that well, but I wish you would Google it because it is gorgeous. Chroma shading inks. They're pretty popular. They tend to be lighter colored inks, I guess, so they have room to change color. I would call this probably a chroma shader. Van Diemen's Snowy Mountain Sunset. I put it in one swatch and it was almost completely green. So I don't know if it's officially called a chroma shader or not, but that's the idea, is that it can show more than one color when you write with it. The second thing that I forgot to mention, and I don't have a card to represent it, but is the idea of mixable inks. So it is not recommended that you just take any 2 inks that you want to take and mix them together to make your own colors. Different companies use different ingredients, different formulas, and there's just no guarantee that you won't end up with some kind of like gooey mess in your pen if you try to mix them together. But there are brands that say that their inks are mixable. There are even like sets that you can get of colors that are made to be mixed together at your own, will. So just be careful. There are plenty of people who just mix inks together and they are usually fine, I'm sure, but it's not recommended. So mix inks at your own risk, or find inks that say they are mixable inks. To make sure you don't end up with a crazy mess. So I am tired, going to bed, and I am sending you back to your regular scheduled programming. There are also what you call lubricated ink. So Noodler's inks, and I'll show you this one, which I'm gonna have to throw away because it's got these, like, I don't know, it kind of got moldy or something. Noodler's inks tend to be very lubricated. They actually have some that are called eel inks. And let me see, I wrote some notes about lubrication and like how to, what a lubricated ink will do is just improve your ink flow. And I got this from onepenshow.com/ink/lubricated. He talked about it. Improve your ink flow and will sometimes help to lubricate the piston mechanism in your pen. It also reduces scratchiness in your nib and increases the line, and can increase the line width. So line width being when you write a line on the paper with one ink with the same pen, it might be thinner, a thinner line with one ink and a thicker line with the other, and lubrication might be the difference. If you have an ink that is really dry, so here were some definitions that I got from Goulet Pens. The Goulet Pens Glossary of Fountain Pen Terminology. A wet ink is when ink flows very freely and heavily out of a pen. This can be a characteristic of a pen or an ink, but both are referring to the same end result of a generous amount of ink coming out of the pen. Dry inks are when ink does not flow very freely or heavily out of a pen. This can be a characteristic of a pen or an ink, but both are referring to the same end result of a limited amount of ink coming out of the pen. Do you like my creative note-taking there? So when people say this is a wet writer or a dry writer, a wet ink, a dry ink, when you try two different inks or several different inks, you will know, a dry writer kind of comes out, feels a little bit almost scratchy on your paper. A lot of times they're in your lighter inks or your pinker, like pinky inks or yellowy, not yellowy, but like your lighter inks a lot of times can be drier. There's just not as much ink going onto the page, and it's not because of your nib width necessarily. But a pen also can be a dry writer, which just means it doesn't let a lot of ink out, and that can be adjusted by a nib meister, or you can learn to do it yourself. I recommend you really do your research, but it can be adjusted where more ink will flow out of your pen, where the ink channel can be made a little bit deeper, and things can be done to make your pen a wetter writer. So those are not like super mysterious terms, but they do kind of confuse people. And it just has to do with how much ink is going onto the page. And a lubricated ink can make a difference. You don't always know if your inks are considered lubricated inks or not. Like, that's not always something that they put in the descriptions. But you can find out, like mountainofink.com, when she does her reviews, she will say this is a drier ink or a wetter ink. You can kind of ask around or just look at pictures and ask questions, and you can find that out. So some problems that you might have with your pen. A lot of times, like I said, it's a combination of your pen, your nib, your pen, your ink, and your paper together can make a difference. But some things that you will see are feathering, which is, I wrote something down. So feathering is when your ink soaks into absorbent paper and it makes like a veiny pattern, kind of like tree branches. So yeah, you kind of know what that is. Like, imagine taking a piece of notebook paper and a Sharpie, and like what that does, you draw your line and then the ink kind of goes, kind of spreads out, and that's called feathering. You see that a lot of times on crappy, copy paper. Fountain pen ink will kind of spread. You can't see that like shading and sheen because it just soaks right into the paper. And even shimmer will kind of be covered up if your ink is just soaking right into your paper. Another is bleed. So let me see, I found a page. Oh yeah, I was going to use this page. So there's two different things that people will say, like bleed is actually where it bleeds through your paper. It might go on, even transfer onto the other side. Like that is when I can see purple that has come through the paper is bleed. There is another term called ghosting or show through, And that has almost more to do with the thickness of your paper. So you can see through here, you can see that there are things on the other side of this paper, but they have not bled through down here, you know? So that is called ghosting. It's almost like you can see a ghost through your paper or whatever. So, I mean, that kind of is self-explanatory, but you know, you may not know that. I marked all these pages to show different examples and now I don't remember. So like here you can see that these bled through, and then this one just ghosted. It's just a ghosting thing. But if this paper was thick like a piece of cardstock, you would not see ghosting. So depends on your paper thickness and how absorbent your paper is. Is it going to soak through? These were like swabs of ink, so they just soak through, even though this is fountain pen friendly Tomoe River paper. There is another term for, this is not a problem, but called Nib Creep. And a lot of times, especially beginner fountain pen users, when you get a little ink on your nib, you know, on the top of your nib, that kind of will just come out right there. People don't like that, especially when they're beginners. They think they've done something wrong, or that, you know, you should be able to clean that off. We call that nib creep because the ink kind of creeps out onto the nib, and it is not a big deal. And a lot of pens, like, you almost can't avoid it. It's gonna happen, it's just gonna be there, and you just, you know, try not to be a perfectionist about it. You can try to use a little tissue and try to, you know, wipe in the right direction, but a lot of times you're just gonna pull more ink right out onto the nib. So try to embrace it, and as well as embracing ink on your hands. Wear it as a badge of honor, and ink creep is not a big deal. There's nothing wrong unless it's like gushing out or like your cap gets full of ink. If your cap has speckles, a bunch of speckles of ink in it, it's likely that you dropped your pen case or something and your ink kind of splattered out of the nib, which it will do, because that ink stays right at the nib, ready to go. There is another term called flooding your feed. So let me grab another pen that's not inked. Let me see. So if you have a pen that is hard starting, so okay, I'm sorry, I should say this first. If you go to write with your pen and nothing comes out, this pen is uninked, so nothing's gonna come out, and nothing comes out, but you know there's ink in there, it's called a hard start. So you're like starting to write, or if you draw a line and there's no ink at the beginning, but then the ink starts coming, that's called a hard start. If you know there's ink in the pen and it's just not writing, or it's writing really dry and you know that it's not characteristic of this pen and ink combo, you can flood your feed. So all that means is taking your pen with ink in it, and whether this is a converter or a piston filler, this would be a lot harder to do with like a vacuum filler, but it's just twisting it just a smidge and pushing that ink in this one, like you could see it. You could see that ink go further down into the feed. Do it just a little bit until you start to see ink on your nib. Like you'll see it start to come out this hole, you'll see it there, and that is called priming your feed. You know, that gets the ink. You can also rub your finger down your nib like this, and sometimes that will help your ink get to the tip. If you're ever writing with your pen, especially a flex nib, do not do this if it's not a flex nib, and you're pressing down on it a little bit to flex that nib, and it draws two lines next to each other instead of one solid line. This is meant to do that. This is meant to flex, I mean. That is called railroading because it draws like two little railroad tracks. That just means usually that you don't have enough ink coming to your nib. So you might need to prime your nib, you might need to dip it in ink or something like that. Again, this is not a fountain pen, I know, just trying to show you that example. That's called railroading. If you're writing and you just have little breaks in your writing, that's called skipping. And yeah, I said hard starting. There's a term called your ink spread, and that just has to do with like how much, when you draw a line, how much does that ink kind of spread out and widen the line on your paper. I have a few different ink samples here. I gotta kind of hurry. So some papers that I use regularly, let's see, this is a really cheap notepad that someone gave me, and it's not even branded. And I did this to show you that some of these inks bled through. They really feathered on this broad nib, especially where the ink feathered. You can't see any of the properties of this ink very well. Even the shimmer, like I can't see the shimmer. I know you can't see it. This too, I like this Docket Gold paper for work because it's relatively fountain pen friendly, but that ink does kind of spread. It kind of soaks in. You don't see a lot of those really nice properties. It bleeds through, but not as much as that other paper. This is an Ecolo pad that I bought from Amazon that I find to be really great. I use this at work a lot because it's not expensive and I can just tear them off and throw them away. This shows off all the properties of ink. It's a really good paper. You can see almost no bleed through. You know, so all of these are the same pen and the same inks, different papers, and how much that makes a difference. And this is the Tool paper from Office Depot, which is what they use for their disc bound notebooks. I don't love the disc bound system, but I love this paper. It's really good for fountain pens. It's not Tomoe River paper. That smear is my fault. It's not quite Tomoe River paper, but it does show off most of those ink properties. And so you can see hopefully how much your paper makes a difference. Let me see. Oh, and one more thing, if your ink is dry, if your ink is writing dry and you want it to be just, you know, flow a little bit better through your pen. I thought I had a good example here of a really dry ink. This was some artwork I did with fountain pen ink and a water brush. It's not artwork. I mean, it's a doodle, you know, like it's not fancy, but anyway, you can add just a tiniest drop of dishwashing liquid, like Dawn dish soap, or food grade glycerin. I had not heard that. To your ink. I would not put it straight into your ink bottle. I would put it into a ink vial and just put the tiniest drop and shake it up really good. This is a shimmer ink that I think I got out to show you to shake up your, that's one thing. Make sure you shake up your shimmer inks before you ink them, or all your shimmer will stay in the bottom of your ink bottle and not go into your pen. Unless you want the shimmer not in your pen, but yes, make sure you shake your ink bottles. So yeah, food grade glycerin or dishwasher detergent can be used to lubricate your ink. And there's also an ink additive called White Lightning. I picked this up about a year ago from Van Ness pens. That this is used at less than 1%. So like I took this ink vial. This is Colorverse Girls Just Wanna, which is one of my favorite pinks. And I filled this up, not all the way to the top, but pretty full. And then they said put in like a half a drop, like the tiniest amount of White Lightning. And, you know, I mixed it up and put it in a pen, and this ink flows better. It's not as dry. So this is a great option if you don't want to experiment with glycerin or dishwashing soap, dish soap. This is a great one, and it's not very expensive. I don't know what it is. It's a secret recipe. So it might just be dish soap and glycerin. I have no idea. But anyway, that is some info about ink. I hope I answered some of your questions. If you have other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and either me or hopefully someone else can help answer your questions. If I said something wrong, please feel free to correct me. If I missed something really big, you know, let me know, and maybe in a future video I can talk a little bit more about ink. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna go get ready to sing. I've got about 17 minutes to be ready to go. So anyway, I hope you'll have a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.